"Don't touch me," whispered the Apache warrior. But he gently covered her wounded feet. The hot sun rose slowly over the wide, empty desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The sand shimmered in the morning light, stretching endlessly in every direction. Clara walked carefully, her bare feet pressing into the warm sand. The rocky path was rough, and small cuts had already formed on her soles. Each step sent sharp stings through her feet, but she had no choice. She had to keep moving. The wind carried with it a dry heat, and her throat felt parched. She had been walking for hours, maybe even days, though she could no longer tell. Her clothes were torn and dusty, and her hair stuck to her sweaty face. Every so often she paused to catch her breath, her chest rising and falling heavily. Clara had been traveling with a group, exploring the lands far from her home, when she had become separated. She had lost track of the others during the night, and in the confusion of the rugged terrain, she had wandered off the path. Now she was alone, surrounded by the endless desert, and a sense of fear crept into her heart. She had always been brave, but this was different. The desert was alive with sounds she could barely identify, the distant call of birds, the whisper of the wind over rocks, and sometimes a quiet, almost imperceptible rustle in the bushes. Clara had learned to be alert. She knew she could not trust the land entirely. As she limped forward, her eyes caught movement in the distance. A figure emerged from behind a line of rocks, tall and strong, moving silently across the sand. Clara froze. Her heart pounded in her chest, and a shiver ran down her spine. She crouched behind a boulder, trying to make herself small. The figure stopped a few steps away from her, his silhouette outlined against the rising sun. He was an Apache warrior, his posture proud and cautious. Clara's mind raced. Should she call for help? Should she try to run? She felt her strength waning, and she knew she could not outrun him even if she tried. The warrior's eyes scanned the area, and he seemed to sense her presence without looking directly at her. He moved carefully, almost silently, until he was close enough that Clara could see his features. His dark hair was tied back neatly, his skin tanned by the sun, and his eyes sharp yet thoughtful. There was a calmness about him, a stillness that made Clara feel both frightened and strangely safe. He paused and whispered softly, almost to himself, "Don't touch me." The words were gentle, but they carried a weight of caution and warning. Clara did not move. She understood immediately that he meant no harm if she respected his distance. At that moment, she realized that this encounter could go in many directions, and only careful actions would ensure her safety. Clara's eyes filled with tears, partly from pain, partly from relief. She could no longer take a step without wincing. The rocks beneath her feet had cut her skin, and blood stained the dust. She pressed her hands against her soles, trying to ease the pain, but it did little good. She realized she could not continue much farther. She was trapped between her injuries and the presence of the warrior. Her mind raced for a solution. Could she signal him? Would he help her? She had no experience with the people of the land, but she knew that sometimes kindness appeared in the quietest gestures, even from strangers. She took a slow breath and tried to make herself calm, hoping that if he approached, he would understand her need without words. The Apache warrior observed her carefully. He could see the blood on her feet and the exhaustion in her posture. He did not rush forward. He respected the distance he had declared. Yet beneath his caution, there was concern. He had grown up in these lands, trained to survive and to respect the boundaries of others. He knew when intervention was necessary, and he knew that sometimes showing care did not require breaking one's own rules. Slowly, he moved closer, but still keeping a respectful distance. He laid down a piece of cloth he had with him, folding it carefully, and then, without touching her, arranged it near her feet. The gesture was small, but it spoke volumes. Clara looked at it and felt a wave of gratitude she could not put into words. She tried to speak, her voice weak from thirst and exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure if he could understand. The warrior's eyes softened slightly, and he nodded once, still maintaining his distance. He did not say anything, but his presence became a quiet comfort. Clara realized that she was not alone. Even though he had warned her not to touch him, he had found a way to help. It was a lesson she would never forget. That kindness often comes in forms that do not demand intimacy, and that respect and care can coexist. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun and the gentle presence of the warrior fill her senses. Time passed slowly. Clara's body needed rest, and the warrior understood this. He remained near, watching over her without imposing, ensuring that no danger approached. The desert was unforgiving, and predators of many kinds could appear without warning. His eyes scanned the horizon, alert to the slightest movement. Clara watched him in silence, noticing the careful way he moved, the way he adjusted the blanket near her feet, and the way he seemed to communicate his care without breaking his promise. She felt a connection growing between them, not a connection of words, but one of understanding and trust. In that quiet, isolated place, they had created a bond that was unspoken yet strong. As the sun climbed higher, the heat of the day pressed down upon them. Clara felt the sting of the desert sun on her back, and her skin prickled with sweat. She tried to shift her position, wincing as her wounded feet touched the rough cloth beneath her. The warrior noticed immediately, his eyes narrowing in concern. He whispered softly, though not expecting her to understand, and moved the cloth to provide a softer layer under her feet. Clara felt a shiver of relief. It was a small act, but it meant everything in that moment. She realized that survival was not just about physical strength, but about the quiet support that sometimes came from others, even strangers. Hours passed, and the desert became a blur of light and heat. Clara's mind drifted in and out of consciousness. She thought of her home, of the people she had left behind, and of the journey that had brought her here. She realized that fear and hope often walked together, and that courage could be found even when the path seemed impossible. The warrior remained near, his presence steady, a silent promise that she would not face this challenge alone. He did not speak much, but when he did, his words were few and measured, reinforcing the trust between them. Clara felt a strange sense of peace in that harsh, unyielding landscape. As evening approached, the sky shifted into deep shades of red and purple. The desert cooled slightly, and the air carried a hint of night. Clara's strength had returned in small measures, but her feet remained injured. The warrior remained vigilant, and she realized that her journey was not over, but she now had an ally in the vast, empty land. She understood that the world could be both dangerous and beautiful, that people could be both wary and kind, and that survival often depended on moments of courage, compassion, and trust. In the quiet of the desert evening, Clara and the Apache warrior shared a moment of understanding that would shape the days to come. The morning sun rose again over the desert, casting long shadows across the sand and rocks. Clara woke slowly, her body aching from the previous day's struggles. Her feet throbbed with pain, but the gentle warmth of the sun on her face brought a small comfort. She opened her eyes and saw the Apache warrior sitting a short distance away. He was alert, his eyes scanning the horizon, but he turned them toward her for a brief moment, as if to check that she was all right. The sight of him brought a mix of relief and nervousness to Clara. She remembered his words from yesterday, "Don't touch me." Yet, despite that warning, he had helped her, and now his presence felt protective, though distant. Clara tried to shift her position, wincing as her wounded feet pressed against the rough cloth. She had been resting, but her injuries needed more care. She looked at the warrior, unsure if she could communicate her need. Words felt weak compared to the pain she was feeling. Slowly, she raised her hand slightly, hoping he would understand. The warrior's eyes softened, and he moved a little closer, not close enough to break his caution, but enough to show that he noticed her gesture. Without touching her, he picked up a small pouch from beside him and opened it, revealing dried herbs and pieces of soft cloth. Clara realized he intended to help her treat her wounds while still respecting his boundaries. Carefully, the warrior took a piece of soft cloth and laid it gently on the sand. He then used the herbs to create a poultice, moving slowly and deliberately. He did not speak much, but his eyes met hers, silently asking for consent. Clara nodded faintly, grateful for his careful approach. She could feel her fear easing slightly. The warrior worked patiently, showing skill and respect. The pain in her feet did not disappear, but the treatment brought relief, and more importantly, it showed her that kindness could come even when words were few. Clara felt a growing sense of trust, though she still remained cautious. As the day grew warmer, the desert seemed alive with small movements. Birds called to each other in the distance, and the wind rustled through the sparse bushes. Clara watched the warrior move around her, collecting water from a nearby stream. The stream was small but clean, and he brought it back carefully, keeping the water safe for her use. He offered her a small sip by tilting the container, careful not to touch her lips directly. Clara drank gratefully, feeling the cool water soothe her dry throat. For a moment, the harshness of the desert seemed less threatening. The warrior's careful actions reminded her that not all strangers were dangerous, and that respect and care could exist even in the harshest places. Throughout the day, Clara tried to regain her strength. She ate a few pieces of dried fruit and bread that the warrior had provided. Each bite gave her a little more energy, but the journey ahead still felt daunting. She looked at the warrior, wondering about his life and how he had learned to survive in this harsh land. He did not offer answers, but his movements and attention spoke volumes. He had grown up with the desert, knew its dangers and secrets, and understood the balance between caution and care. Clara realized that survival was not just about physical strength. It was also about patience, observation, and understanding. As afternoon approached, the desert sun became hotter, and the sand radiated a warmth that made Clara's feet sting. The warrior noticed her discomfort immediately. Without a word, he moved some large rocks to create a shaded area. He carefully placed the blanket near her feet again, adjusting it to provide more comfort. Clara felt a wave of gratitude, realizing that he was watching over her, ensuring she was as safe as possible without overstepping. She wanted to speak, to thank him properly, but the words felt small compared to the care he was showing. Instead, she nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his kindness. Later, Clara attempted to stand, leaning on a stick she had fashioned from a branch. Her injuries made it difficult, and each step was painful. The warrior watched closely, ready to guide her if necessary. He did not grab her or touch her directly, but his presence gave her courage. She realized that courage was not just about facing danger. It was also about trusting others when it mattered most. Slowly, with careful steps, she moved a few meters, feeling the ache in her feet with every movement. The warrior stayed close enough to offer help if needed, but far enough to respect his boundaries. It was a delicate balance, and Clara felt a strange sense of admiration for his discipline. The desert seemed endless, but the warrior had chosen a safe path for her. He guided her with gestures, pointing toward rocks that could provide relief or areas with less harsh sand. Clara followed, learning to read his silent instructions. They did not speak much, but communication had taken a new form, a language of gestures, glances, and understanding. She felt a connection growing between them, not of words or promises, but of shared experience and mutual respect. The warrior's patience and care were teaching her lessons she would carry beyond the desert. That trust was earned quietly, and that help could come in subtle, powerful ways. As the day faded toward evening, the sky transformed into soft shades of purple and orange. The temperature cooled slightly, offering a brief respite from the heat. Clara found a smoother patch of sand and settled down, letting the warmth of the day soak into her skin. The warrior crouched nearby, alert to the surroundings but allowing her to rest. She observed him, noticing the strength in his posture and the gentleness in his actions. He had not spoken harshly or imposed his presence, yet he had ensured her safety and comfort. Clara realized that bravery could be quiet and that protection did not always require words or physical closeness. Night approached, bringing cooler air and a quiet calm over the desert. Stars appeared one by one, twinkling above the vast landscape. Clara lay back on the blanket, her feet still aching but feeling cared for. The warrior stayed near, ensuring she was safe from the dangers that might lurk in the darkness. The desert night could be unpredictable, but his vigilance offered a sense of security. Clara thought about the events of the past day, the fear, the pain, the kindness, and the trust. She understood that this encounter would shape her in ways she could not yet fully grasp. It was more than survival. It was a lesson in human connection and respect. Clara drifted into a light sleep, comforted by the presence of the warrior. She dreamed of the desert not as a place of fear, but as a land where courage and compassion could coexist. The warrior remained watchful, his own thoughts quiet but focused. He reflected on the young woman's resilience, her determination to move forward despite pain, and her quiet strength. There was a respect growing within him for her, not the kind that demanded closeness, but the kind that honored spirit and will. They had both found something unexpected in each other, a silent understanding, a bond forged by circumstance and care, and a reminder that even in harsh landscapes, moments of humanity could shine through. When Clara awoke the next morning, she felt a little stronger. Her feet were still sore, but the warrior's careful treatment had made a difference. She tried to speak, offering a small smile and a soft "thank you." The warrior nodded, his expression unreadable but his eyes conveying acknowledgement. They did not need words to understand each other fully. The desert had created its own language, one of observation, care, and trust. Clara realized that her journey was far from over, but she was no longer entirely alone. With the warrior guiding her silently, she felt that she could face whatever challenges the desert might bring. By the time the sun climbed higher in the sky, Clara and the warrior were ready to move again. She balanced carefully on the stick, taking small, deliberate steps. The warrior stayed just behind her, observing every movement. They crossed rocky terrain and sandy patches, navigating together without speaking much. Each step was a shared effort, a testament to trust and quiet teamwork. Clara felt a growing admiration for the warrior's skill, his patience, and his unwavering respect for her boundaries. She began to understand that survival was as much about the spirit as it was about the body, and that human kindness could be found in the most unexpected forms. As the day ended, Clara paused to rest once more. The warrior placed the blanket near her feet and gestured for her to lie down. She did so, grateful for the small comforts. The desert stretched endlessly around them, but in that moment it felt less threatening. Clara realized that her journey was no longer just about escaping danger. It was about learning, understanding, and connecting. The warrior had shown her that strength could be gentle, that care did not always require words, and that trust could grow even in the harshest conditions. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the desert sun mingle with the quiet presence of the Apache warrior, feeling a sense of safety and hope she had not felt since her journey began. The next morning, the desert was quiet and still, as if holding its breath. Clara woke to the gentle warmth of the rising sun, feeling a little stronger than the day before. Her feet still ached, and her steps were careful, but she felt determined to continue. She looked over at the Apache warrior, who was already awake, sitting near a small patch of shade and watching the horizon. There was a calm confidence in his posture, a quiet alertness that seemed to belong naturally to the land around him. Clara studied him for a moment, appreciating how his careful watchfulness made her feel safer, even without words. She tried to stand and move, using the stick she had fashioned to support herself. Each step sent a sharp sting through her wounded feet, but she forced herself to focus on the path ahead. The warrior followed, maintaining a respectful distance, his eyes scanning the ground for any hazards. Rocks and small plants jutted out unpredictably from the sandy earth, and he silently guided her around them with subtle gestures. A nod, a hand raised slightly, a tilt of the head. These simple movements communicated safety and direction without breaking the careful boundaries they had established. Clara realized that communication did not always need words. Sometimes, understanding came from observation, trust, and attention to detail. As they walked, the sun climbed higher and the heat pressed down on them. Clara felt the sweat on her skin, the sting of sunburn forming on her shoulders and neck, and the dryness in her mouth. She tried to ignore the discomfort, focusing on her breathing and the rhythm of her steps. The warrior, noticing her struggle, picked up a small branch and moved it to provide intermittent shade along the path. He did not touch her directly, but the gesture offered relief from the relentless sun. Clara felt a deep gratitude toward him. His presence was no longer just about survival. It had become a source of strength, a quiet reassurance that she could continue despite the pain. By midday, they reached a small canyon where the sun's intensity lessened slightly. Clara paused to rest on a smooth rock while the warrior carefully examined the surrounding area. He seemed to be looking for signs of danger or sources of water, moving quietly and deliberately. Clara noticed how naturally he seemed to belong in this harsh environment, as if he were part of the land itself. She, on the other hand, felt fragile, unsteady in contrast to his strength and sure-footedness. Yet she also felt a sense of admiration growing for him, not just for his skills and survival instincts, but for the way he balanced caution with care. He had a discipline she had rarely seen in others, and it inspired a quiet confidence within her. While resting, Clara attempted to speak. Do you eat here?" she asked, her voice hesitant. The warrior glanced at her, then reached into his pouch and retrieved some dried meat and small pieces of bread. He laid them on a flat stone in front of her without touching her hands. Clara ate slowly, savoring each bite. She felt stronger with each piece of food, and she also began to feel more comfortable in his presence. There was a rhythm to their interaction, a pattern of giving and receiving, watching and understanding, that made the silence between them feel safe rather than uncomfortable. Clara realized that she was beginning to rely on him not just for physical survival, but for guidance and emotional support. As the afternoon sun reached its peak, the heat of the desert became nearly unbearable. Clara struggled to continue walking, her strength waning despite the nourishment. The warrior noticed her hesitation and paused with her. He pointed to a nearby outcropping of rocks, indicating that they could rest in the shade. Clara sat down, grateful for the cool relief. He remained nearby, not sitting directly beside her, but close enough to ensure she was safe. She felt a quiet sense of comfort in this unspoken protection. Her fear from the first day had faded slightly, replaced by a cautious trust that allowed her to relax, even in the challenging environment. During this rest, Clara reflected on the journey so far. She thought about her separation from her group, the injuries she had sustained, and the unexpected encounter with the Apache warrior. She realized how fragile life could feel in the desert, how quickly circumstances could change, and how deeply people could impact each other even in a short time. The warrior had taught her an important lesson, that strength and care were not opposites but companions. He had shown her that protection could be gentle, and that guidance could be offered without overstepping boundaries. After resting, they resumed their journey. The canyon walls provided some shelter from the wind, and the path was less treacherous, though still challenging. Clara focused on each step, leaning on her stick and listening to the subtle sounds of the desert. The warrior moved beside her, occasionally pointing out safer footing or warning her of loose stones. She began to notice small details she had missed before: the way shadows moved with the sun, the patterns in the sand, the way the wind carried scents from distant plants and streams. These observations, combined with the warrior's guidance, helped her move more confidently, though she still felt the sharp sting of her injured feet with every step. As evening approached, they reached a small area where desert plants were slightly more abundant. The warrior gestured for Clara to rest, while he prepared a small spot for them to camp. He arranged a few blankets and pieces of cloth, creating a comfortable area for her to sit and relieve the pressure on her feet. Clara sat down gratefully, leaning back against a rock and letting out a deep breath. The warrior returned with a small container of water, which he offered to her without touching her directly. She drank slowly, savoring the cool liquid and the relief it brought. The simple acts of care and attention made Clara realize how much she had come to rely on his presence and guidance. That night, under the vast desert sky, Clara and the warrior shared the quiet of the land. The stars twinkled above, and the temperature dropped slightly, providing a gentle relief from the day's heat. Clara lay on the blankets, feeling her body ache from the day's journey, but also feeling a sense of safety and trust. The warrior remained nearby, alert to any potential danger, his eyes scanning the horizon even in the dim light. She noticed the careful way he adjusted the blankets, ensuring her comfort without breaking his distance. It was a quiet, patient care that spoke volumes, and Clara felt a growing admiration for his character and discipline. As the night deepened, Clara's thoughts drifted to the lessons she had learned so far. She had come into the desert alone, fearful, injured, and uncertain. Yet in the presence of the warrior, she had discovered resilience she did not know she possessed. She had learned that trust could be built without words, that care could be offered without touching, and that strength could be expressed in quiet, deliberate actions. The warrior had become more than a protector. He was a guide, a teacher, and a symbol of the balance between caution and compassion. In the early hours before dawn, Clara awoke briefly, feeling the coolness of the desert night on her skin. She saw the warrior sitting silently nearby, his eyes focused on the distant horizon. Even in the darkness, he seemed alert, ready to respond to any threat, yet respectful of her space. Clara felt a sense of connection that went beyond words or gestures. She realized that the bond they had formed was built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared experience. It was a bond that would continue to grow as their journey progressed, shaping not only their immediate survival, but also their understanding of courage, kindness, and trust. The following morning, Clara rose with renewed determination. Her feet were still sore, but the warrior's careful attention had made them manageable. She attempted to take a few steps, using her stick for support, and noticed that the warrior adjusted his pace to match hers, allowing her to move at her own speed. Each step felt slightly less painful than the day before, and with each movement, Clara felt a small victory. The desert remained a challenging environment, but she now had a guide, a silent companion whose presence offered safety, encouragement, and the reassurance that she could continue. As they moved through the rocky terrain and sandy stretches, Clara began to notice the subtleties of the warrior's guidance. He would point to shaded areas, signal the safest places to step, and occasionally provide water or food without speaking a word. These gestures, small and deliberate, reinforced the trust between them. Clara realized that their connection was deepening, not through conversation or physical contact, but through the quiet acts of care and understanding that marked each step of their journey. She felt a sense of admiration and gratitude, recognizing the strength, patience, and wisdom of the warrior who had entered her life unexpectedly. By late afternoon, they reached a small plateau that offered a clear view of the surrounding desert. Clara paused to rest, taking in the vastness of the land and the beauty of the distant mountains. The warrior remained nearby, scanning the horizon and maintaining a vigilant watch. Clara felt a sense of awe at the desert's vastness and the resilience it demanded. She understood that survival required more than physical strength. It required patience, observation, and an understanding of one's surroundings. The warrior had become her guide in these lessons, teaching her not through words, but through presence, action, and careful attention to detail. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the desert, Clara felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced another day of challenges, and with the warrior's guidance, she had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of the subtle rhythms of the land. The bond between them had grown deeper, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Clara realized that this journey was not only about survival, but also about learning, understanding, and forming a connection that transcended words and physical boundaries. The desert morning was cool, but it carried a quiet tension. Clara woke with a mixture of determination and unease. Her feet, though recovering slowly, still ached, and she knew that the journey ahead would test both her strength and courage. She looked over at the Apache warrior, who was already awake, his posture alert, his eyes scanning the horizon. There was an intensity in his gaze that made Clara feel both safe and cautious. He had kept her alive through the challenges of the desert, but she understood that danger could arrive at any moment. The desert was unpredictable, and every step forward required awareness, skill, and sometimes courage that she did not yet know she had. They began their day's journey slowly, navigating the rocky terrain with care. Clara moved cautiously, leaning on her stick and following the warrior's subtle guidance. He would point to safer paths, indicate where she could rest, and ensure that the ground was stable before she stepped. Clara had grown used to reading his gestures, learning a silent language of signals that made communication possible without words. Each step was a balance of trust and effort. She felt the pain in her feet, but she also felt a quiet confidence growing inside her, a realization that she was not completely helpless, and that she could rely on both her own strength and the warrior's guidance. The desert, which had seemed so peaceful in the mornings before, now held an undercurrent of danger. The wind shifted, carrying unfamiliar sounds, rustling rocks, distant animal cries, and the low hum of the desert's hidden life. Clara's heart raced and the warrior's eyes sharpened. He paused suddenly, crouching low and scanning the horizon with careful precision. Clara froze, following his gaze. Far off in the distance, a group of riders approached, moving quickly across the sand. The warrior's expression was unreadable, but Clara could sense the alertness and readiness in his every movement. He whispered softly, though not directly to her, "We must be careful." The riders were strangers, their intent unknown. Clara felt a surge of fear, but she remembered the warrior's steady presence and trusted him. He guided her behind a cluster of rocks, creating a natural shield. She pressed herself to the ground, trying to make herself small, and felt the sting of her wounded feet against the rough surface. The warrior moved beside her, silent and cautious, ensuring she was safe without touching her. He scanned the approaching riders, noting their speed and the direction of the wind. Clara understood that he was assessing every possible threat, considering how best to keep her out of harm's way. Time seemed to stretch as the riders drew closer. The warrior adjusted the blanket near Clara's feet, providing some comfort while remaining vigilant. He whispered instructions through gestures, pointing, tilting his head, and making small movements that Clara understood without confusion. She followed his guidance, her body tense but alert. The desert held its breath with them, the wind carrying the scent of distant plants and the faint dust of approaching movement. Clara realized that survival depended not only on physical strength, but on patience, observation, and the ability to trust those who guided her. As the riders came closer, the warrior assessed the situation with remarkable skill. He noted their numbers, their direction, and the possible intentions behind their presence. Clara watched him silently, amazed at his calm and calculated movements. He had taught her patience through example, showing that fear could be managed and danger could be navigated with careful planning. She felt a growing admiration for him, not only for his skills but for his ability to remain composed under pressure. The desert had tested her courage, but she now understood that true bravery often required both mind and heart working together. The riders slowed as they neared the rocks, but the warrior remained ready. He whispered again, gesturing toward a narrow path that would allow them to move out of sight. Clara followed his lead, her steps deliberate and careful. Each movement was guided by his subtle signals, and she felt the weight of trust and responsibility. The desert seemed to hold them in a suspended moment where every decision mattered. Clara's heart pounded, but she felt a strange sense of focus, as if the danger sharpened her awareness rather than weakened it. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Once they had moved to a safer location, the warrior guided Clara to a small canyon that provided natural cover. They paused to rest, the tension of the encounter slowly easing. Clara's feet ached, but the warrior had created a spot for her to sit comfortably. He offered water, tilting the container toward her without touching her, and she drank gratefully. The silence between them was filled with unspoken understanding. Clara realized that the bond they shared had grown stronger through the challenges they had faced together. She trusted him completely, and he had proven that care and protection could coexist with respect and boundaries. As the sun climbed higher, the desert heat intensified, and Clara felt her energy waning. The warrior noticed immediately and adjusted the shade over her with careful movements, ensuring she remained as comfortable as possible. He then surveyed the surrounding area for any signs of danger, moving with quiet precision. Clara watched him, realizing how deeply his presence had shaped her understanding of survival. He had taught her to observe, to anticipate, and to remain calm even when threats were near. Each gesture, each careful action, reinforced the lessons she had been learning about courage, patience, and trust. The afternoon brought new challenges. Small desert creatures stirred, and the wind shifted, carrying new scents and sounds. The warrior guided Clara carefully, pointing to areas where the sand was loose or the rocks were unstable. She followed his lead, moving slowly but steadily. Each step was a test of endurance, but also a test of the bond they had formed. Clara realized that their connection was built on mutual respect and understanding, not words or promises. The warrior's silent care had become a source of strength, and she found herself relying on his guidance as much as on her own determination. As evening approached, they found a sheltered area where they could rest for the night. The warrior arranged the blankets and provided water and food, ensuring Clara's comfort without overstepping his boundaries. She lay back, her body tired but her spirit strengthened by the day's challenges. The desert, which had seemed vast and intimidating, now felt navigable with his guidance. Clara realized that she had grown stronger, not just physically but emotionally, learning to trust, to observe, and to act with courage in the face of danger. That night, under the vast expanse of stars, the warrior remained alert, watching the desert for any signs of threat. Clara lay on the blankets, feeling a sense of safety and gratitude. She reflected on the day, the dangers they had faced, the moments of fear and tension, and the careful guidance of the Apache warrior. She realized that survival was about more than just enduring hardships. It was about understanding the land, reading the signs of danger, and trusting those who had the knowledge and skill to guide you. The bond between them had deepened, forged through shared experience, respect, and unspoken communication. During the quiet hours, Clara thought about the lessons she had learned. She had entered the desert alone, injured, and uncertain. Now, with the warrior by her side, she had learned patience, observation, and the strength of silent care. The danger of the day had tested her courage and resilience, but it had also shown her the depth of trust and understanding that could exist between two people, even in extreme circumstances. She realized that bravery was not just about facing threats. It was about learning, adapting, and forming connections that allowed both survival and growth. As dawn approached again, Clara felt a renewed sense of determination. Her feet, though still sore, were stronger, and her spirit felt fortified by the challenges they had faced together. She understood that the journey was far from over, but she also knew that she was no longer alone in the desert. The Apache warrior had become more than a guide. He was a companion, a protector, and a teacher. The trials of the day had strengthened their bond, proving that even in a harsh and unforgiving land, courage, care, and trust could create a powerful and unspoken connection. The sun rose over the horizon, casting golden light across the desert. Clara stood carefully, feeling the firmness of the sand beneath her feet. The warrior moved beside her, alert and vigilant, ensuring that she was safe as they continued their journey. Each step was deliberate, measured, and supported by the silent communication they had developed. The desert remained unpredictable, but Clara now faced it with a combination of courage, skill, and trust that she had not possessed when she first arrived. The challenges of the day had revealed the depth of human connection, the quiet strength of care, and the importance of resilience in the face of danger. By mid-morning, they reached a small ridge overlooking the surrounding desert. Clara paused to catch her breath, looking out at the vast landscape. She could see the traces of their journey in the footprints they had left behind and felt a sense of accomplishment. The warrior remained close, his eyes scanning the horizon and maintaining vigilance. Clara realized that she had grown stronger not just in body, but in mind and spirit. She had learned to trust, to act with courage, and to rely on both her own strength and the careful guidance of another. The trials of the desert had shaped her, preparing her for the challenges yet to come, and deepening the connection she shared with the Apache warrior. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, spilling golden light across the endless sand and rocky hills. Clara awoke with a mixture of hope and determination. She had survived the dangers of the desert with the guidance of the Apache warrior, and though her feet still throbbed with pain, she felt a growing strength inside her. Each step forward was a triumph, and each moment of quiet survival had taught her lessons she would never forget. The warrior sat a short distance away, his eyes scanning the horizon, his posture calm but alert. Clara looked at him and felt a wave of gratitude and admiration. He had guided her, protected her, and treated her with respect and care, all without ever breaking his own boundaries. They began the day's journey slowly, careful not to strain Clara's injured feet. The desert was bright and still, the silence broken only by the occasional call of distant birds and the whisper of the wind over the rocks. Clara leaned on her walking stick, following the warrior's subtle gestures and guidance. He pointed out safer paths, indicated areas where she could rest, and made small signs when danger might be near. Clara had grown used to reading these gestures, and she followed them instinctively. The connection they had built over the past days had created a silent understanding between them, a language of trust and respect that required no words. As the day progressed, the heat grew intense, and the desert's challenges became more pronounced. Clara felt her strength fading with each step, but the warrior's presence gave her courage. He moved beside her, alert and careful, ready to intervene if necessary but always respectful of her space. He guided her toward patches of shade, small clusters of rocks that could protect them from the sun, and areas with smoother sand that would be easier on her feet. Each gesture reminded Clara that she was not alone and that she could continue despite the difficulties. She felt her confidence growing, and with it, a quiet pride in her own resilience. Around midday, they reached a small stream hidden among rocks and desert plants. Clara's eyes widened with relief at the sight of water. She had been thirsty, and the journey had drained her energy. The warrior approached the stream first, assessing it carefully to ensure it was safe. Once he was satisfied, he gestured for Clara to come forward. She knelt beside the water, cupping it in her hands and drinking slowly. The cool water soothed her parched throat and refreshed her tired body. The warrior watched her closely, ensuring she was safe and unharmed. Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude and trust. He had guided her not only through the dangers of the desert, but also through the simple acts that were essential for survival. After drinking, Clara rested for a while, allowing her body to recover before continuing. She felt the pain in her feet more acutely now, but the small victories of the past days, moving safely, following the warrior's guidance and surviving danger, had strengthened her resolve. She realized that courage was not the absence of pain or fear, but the ability to move forward despite them. The warrior sat nearby, silent and watchful, his presence comforting. Clara felt a growing admiration for him, not only for his skill and knowledge of the desert, but for his patience, discipline, and the gentle way he had treated her. As the afternoon approached, they continued their journey. The desert stretched endlessly before them, the landscape both beautiful and unforgiving. Clara's feet ached with every step, but she focused on the rhythm of her movement, trusting the warrior's guidance and her own resilience. They navigated rocky terrain, patches of loose sand, and the occasional desert plant that seemed to appear unexpectedly. Clara had learned to observe the land carefully, noticing patterns, listening to the sounds, and understanding the subtle signs of the desert. The warrior had taught her to read the environment, and she now felt a deep respect for the knowledge and skills he had shared with her. Evening approached, and the desert sky transformed into shades of orange, pink, and purple. The sun cast long shadows, and the temperature began to cool. Clara and the warrior found a sheltered area to rest for the night. The warrior arranged the blankets and created a comfortable space for Clara to sit and relieve the pressure on her feet. He offered her water and a small amount of food, ensuring her nourishment without touching her directly. Clara felt a wave of gratitude and warmth. The desert, which had seemed harsh and threatening, now felt manageable with the warrior by her side. She realized that the bond they had formed over the past days had grown into something profound, a connection built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. That night, under the vast canopy of stars, Clara reflected on the journey they had shared. She thought about the fear and uncertainty she had felt when she first became separated from her group, the pain of her injuries, and the kindness and guidance of the Apache warrior. She understood that survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about patience, observation, and the quiet acts of care that made life possible in such a harsh environment. She felt a deep respect for the warrior and a gratitude that was difficult to put into words. The next morning brought a sense of anticipation. Clara knew that their journey was approaching a turning point. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more attuned to the desert's rhythms. Her feet, though still tender, had improved thanks to the warrior's careful attention. She felt a renewed determination to continue, knowing that the lessons she had learned would guide her forward. The warrior, as always, moved with alert precision, guiding her through the terrain and ensuring that each step was safe. Clara relied on his gestures, his silent signals, and the trust they had built over their shared journey. Around midday, they reached a ridge that offered a wide view of the desert below. Clara paused, taking in the vastness of the landscape and reflecting on the journey they had shared. She could see the traces of their steps in the sand, the small signs of life that marked the desert, and the distant mountains that hinted at new challenges ahead. The warrior stood nearby, scanning the horizon, and Clara realized that this moment was a culmination of everything they had experienced together: the fear, the struggle, the trust, and the courage. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had survived, learned, and grown. As they prepared to continue, Clara's path became slightly steeper and more challenging. The warrior adjusted his pace to match hers, ensuring that she could navigate the terrain safely. Each step required focus, determination, and careful attention to her injured feet. Clara realized that the desert was both testing and strengthening her, teaching her resilience, patience, and the importance of trust. She had learned that courage was not about rushing forward recklessly, but about understanding the land, anticipating danger, and relying on both her own strength and the guidance of others. Late in the afternoon, they encountered a small group of desert creatures, a herd of deer moving gracefully across the sand. Clara watched them with awe, marveling at their elegance and the way they navigated the harsh terrain. The warrior gestured for her to observe quietly, and she realized that even in a desert filled with challenges, there was life, beauty, and harmony. This moment reminded her that survival was not just about avoiding danger, but also about noticing the world around her, appreciating its subtle wonders, and finding balance within it. As evening fell, the desert sky transformed once again into brilliant colors of orange, pink, and purple. Clara and the warrior found a sheltered spot for the night, arranging blankets and resting. Clara reflected on everything she had learned: trust, patience, courage, and the quiet power of care. She understood that the warrior's guidance had not only kept her alive, but had also taught her how to connect with the land, with others, and with herself. The bond they had formed was profound, a connection that transcended words, gestures, and boundaries. The following morning, Clara felt a sense of readiness. Her feet were stronger, her body more resilient, and her mind clear. She knew that she could continue her journey, equipped not only with physical strength but also with the lessons of courage, patience, and trust. The warrior, as always, moved with quiet alertness, guiding her safely through the desert. Clara followed his gestures, interpreting each subtle signal and learning to anticipate his guidance. The journey was not yet complete, but she felt prepared, confident, and grateful for the experience they had shared. As they reached the edge of a distant plateau, Clara looked out over the desert below. She saw the endless expanse of sand and rock, the faint traces of their journey, and the signs of life that persisted even in the harshest conditions. She turned to the warrior who stood silently nearby and offered a soft smile. The connection between them was clear, built on trust, care, and shared experience. They had faced danger, injury, and uncertainty together, and had come through it with a bond that was both profound and unspoken. Finally, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows and bathing the desert in warm light, Clara realized that her journey had changed her. She had come into the desert alone, vulnerable and uncertain. Now she emerged stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the world around her. The Apache warrior had guided her, protected her, and taught her lessons that went beyond survival, lessons about courage, respect, trust, and the quiet power of care. As she prepared to continue her path beyond the desert, she knew that she carried not only the experience of survival, but also the profound connection that had grown between them. Clara and the warrior shared a final, silent moment. They did not need words to express their gratitude, respect, and understanding. The bond they had formed over the days of struggle, danger, and trust was unspoken but deep. Clara felt a sense of closure and peace, knowing that she could continue her journey with the strength and lessons she had gained. The warrior remained nearby, vigilant yet respectful, a reminder of the quiet power of patience, guidance, and trust. Together they had faced the desert, and together they had grown stronger. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, Clara rested, ready to continue her journey beyond the desert. She carried with her the lessons of survival, the knowledge of the land, and the memory of the Apache warrior who had guided her with care, patience, and respect. The desert had tested her, shaped her, and transformed her, leaving her stronger, wiser, and ready for the challenges ahead. The journey was complete, but its lessons would remain with her forever, a testament to courage, trust, and the quiet power of human connection.